back to Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobby Holmes. If you're watching on YouTube, please excuse my appearance. My eyes have been doing something weird, so I'm just giving them a break from makeup today. Last week, I wrapped up spooky season with the Miami zombie. Thank you to those who sent messages about the case. 100% of you thought bath salts were the cause, and I agree. It seems like the only reasonable explanation for his actions. Also, please go back and check out the Halloween special. My 5-year-old son, Penn, wanted to do another episode. This year's Halloween costume inspired him to tell you all about another killer creature, the werewolf. He's so cute, I can't handle it. Big thanks to this week's sponsor, Falcon Settlement Incorporated. Falcon has provided top quality real estate services at very competitive rates for lenders, realtors, buyers, and sellers since 1982. They strive to provide timely and organized services, scheduling closings at your convenience. Their home office is located in Hawthorne, PA, with a branch in DuBois, PA. For more information, visit falconsettlement.com. Today, I am back to covering listener story suggestions. This case was sent in by Sarah Savage. She wanted me to cover convicted murderer Danilo Restivo, an Italian man who committed one murder in Italy and another in England. Let's start with our background on Danilo. He was born April of 1972 in Sicily. He grew up in the city of Potenza. Danilo's father was director of the local branch of the National Library. His family was quite privileged compared to most and well known within the community. As a kid, he was super awkward, which can make landing a girlfriend especially challenging. Apparently, no one stepped up to help give Danilo proper dating advice. His tactics were questionable. In his early 20s, he was living at home with his parents and still trying to land a date with a girl. In an effort to entice girls, he would say that he had a present to give them, essentially a bribe. When his offers were rejected, he would turn around and harass them, repeatedly call the girls and not say a word, just play the soundtrack of Profondo Rosso. The songs are by a band named Goblin, and the movie is about a serial killer. I gave the first song on the soundtrack a listen. It definitely has a horror film vibe, and I would be totally freaked out hearing it on the other end of an anonymous phone call. No wonder girls don't want to go out with you, Danilo. One girl finally caved and agreed to meet him for a date. 16-year-old Elisa Claps. She felt bad for Danilo because he had been bullied his whole life. The awkward, shy kids tend to be a target. His appearance didn't help. He was overweight and wore glasses. It never made sense to me the fact that someone wore glasses warranted being picked on. Elisa figured it couldn't hurt to just meet up with him once, give him some attention, boost his spirits, but she planned to let him know she wasn't interested in a relationship. She chose a place she felt safe, the 15th century Church of the Holy Trinity. What could go wrong at a church, right? It was September 12th, 1993, when Elisa and a friend, who remains unnamed, literally in all of my sources she's referred to as Elisa's friend, walked to the church. They arrived at 11:30 a.m. The service that Sunday morning was just ending. Elisa's friend dropped her off at the church and went on about her day. And that's the last time anyone ever saw Elisa. When she didn't come home that evening, her family started to worry. Her brother, Gildo, knew that she was planning to meet Danilo for that day. Gildo called Danilo's house phone. His parents answered and said that he wasn't there. In fact, he wasn't even in town at the moment. This raised a lot of suspicion. Someone was lying. Whether Elisa lied about meeting Danilo lied to his parents about being out of town, or his parents lied to cover for him. Gildo went down to the church because it was the last place that he knew Elisa to be. There was no sign of her there. The upstairs part of the church was locked. The priest was the only one who had the key and had already left for the day. Elisa's disappearance was reported to the police, but you know the deal with most missing person reports. A certain amount of time has to pass or they won't take it seriously. She's a teen. She probably just ran away. Blah, blah, blah. Everyone knows the first 72 hours in a missing person case is the most critical, yet in many instances, they wait 24 or even 48 hours to do anything about it. When more time passed and Elisa was still missing, an investigation was launched. In the days after her disappearance, Gildo received an email from Elisa. It basically said she was leaving the country. She was going to live a fabulous life, and don't worry about her. She'll be fine. Alarm bells were ringing. She was 16 years old, and this seemed very out of character for Elisa. None of her family believed it to be true. The police did not dig further into this email. If they did, they would have discovered that the email was not sent from another country. It came from an internet cafe right there in Potenza. Danilo Restivo could be placed there at the very same time it was sent. But these facts wouldn't be discovered until later. Danilo was questioned because both Elisa's friend and her brother reported that she was going to meet him. Danilo's story was as follows. He did meet Elisa at the church, but she left only after a few minutes, and he stayed there longer to pray. After he finished praying, he traveled to Naples, which is why Danilo's parents told Gildo that he was out of town. During his questioning, police noticed that Danilo had a wound on his hand. He said he had cut it by accident. I think I would have a better story prepared as to how it happened. The next person questioned was the priest. He reported leaving after Mass, meaning he was not there when Elisa and Danilo met. He wasn't very helpful with the investigation, denying police access to the upper floors of the church. To me, this is super suspicious. If there's nothing to hide, why not allow them to search for clues of a missing teenage girl? It's times like these that I like to bust out the "what would Jesus do" question. Elisa's friend was also interviewed. Some people didn't believe her story and thought she played a role in the disappearance. Even though there wasn't any solid evidence against Danilo, he was still a person of interest. Police were familiar with him. He had reports filed against him by 9 different women. They all had the same story. Danilo sneakily cut a lock of their hair. Then he kept it pressed inside of a book as a keepsake. Those are not the only reports filed against him. Danilo supposedly tied 2 children down to chairs and injured one of them using a knife. For some unknown reason, an arrest was never made. Perhaps lack of evidence? In Italy, the chief librarian is highly regarded and you could say a powerful position. His father's connection with the police could have been what kept him out of prison. When Danilo turned 30 years old, he left Italy and moved to the town of Bournemouth, England, to start a new life. There, he met a woman online. She had a mental disability and was honestly more like a mother figure than a girlfriend. He had been a coddled child all of his life, so this new relationship fit him well. It didn't take long before Danilo moved in with her. He became intrigued with a neighbor of his named Heather Barnett. She was a single mother of 2 children, a 14-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl. After watching her for nearly 6 months, Danilo walked across the street and rang her doorbell. He asked Heather for a favor. He wanted her to make a set of curtains that he could give as a Christmas present to his partner. Curtains are definitely more of a mom gift than for a girlfriend. Clearly, he knows nothing about women. A week later, on November 12, 2002, Danilo returned to Heather's home. He walked with her to her sewing room. Then his true intentions came to light. There were signs of a struggle. Her sewing machine was knocked over, and items were thrown throughout the room. He dragged Heather into the living room where he began beating her with a hammer, fracturing her skull. Heather died quickly from her injuries. Danilo then dragged her back the hall and into the bathroom. What he did next made it seem like his fetish was not just with hair, but cutting in general. He used scissors to mutilate her body. He cut off both of her breasts and placed them on the floor behind her. A couple of hours later, Heather's children returned home from school and found her in the bathroom. As horrible as this murder is, this part hurts my heart so much. I always say this type of crime affects more than just the victim. Not only did these kids lose their mom, but they were the ones to discover her mutilated body. I doubt they will ever be able to erase the image from their mind. Danilo and his partner were the first onlookers to the scene, coming outside when they saw the children hysterically crying. The police arrived soon after. It was discovered that Heather was clutching a lock of hair in each hand. In her left hand was a bundle of her own hair, but in her right hand, it was someone else's. So the killer, Danilo, placed one of his old keepsakes into her hand to be found. Inside Heather's home, there were bloody footprints made by a pair of tennis shoes. The killer did not have prints leading out the door, which means they probably changed their clothes or at least their shoes before they left. One thing found at the scene was a blood-soaked green hand towel thrown on the couch. The towel had Heather's blood on it, but the towel did not come from her house. Fibers found on the towel showed 2 different people handled the towel, but there wasn't enough DNA present to run any tests. Danilo had an alibi ready for the investigators, which kept them off his trail. He said that he went to the unemployment center to take a class on computer skills. The logbook showed he was present there at the day and time of the murder. But when looking closer at the logbook, the time he arrived had been modified. Police began looking more seriously into Danilo as a suspect. There were holes in his alibi, and Heather's son reported that her keys went missing after Danilo came over 1 week earlier, and that he had recently soaked his tennis shoes in bleach. Seriously? He must have really liked those shoes because I would have just burned them. Why keep incriminating evidence? This case was covered in an episode of The World's Most Evil Killers, which is the main source I used for researching this case. They talk about him as if he's a genius because he wore gloves and changed his clothes and used bleach to clean up. My goodness, everyone knows that stuff. I think he's a dumbass for leaving a towel from his house at a crime scene and keeping the shoes he tracked blood all over the house with. Even if there's no sign of blood left on the shoes, they can still match the print. The investigation team was able to dig up the dirt on Danilo that linked him to the disappearance of Elisa Claps in 1993. They didn't have the evidence needed to charge Danilo with Heather's murder, so he was put under surveillance to see what more they could find. He was seen stalking women coming in and out of beauty salons. One day, Danilo was followed to a park where he hid in the bushes and watched women walk, jog, and bike past him on the trail. He was wearing gloves and carrying a backpack with him. The investigators were not going to stand by and let Danilo attack another woman. He was approached by the officers, and his bag was searched. They discovered a large knife, scissors, a ski mask, and an extra pair of gloves. Sounds like a kill kit to me. He was wearing 2 layers of identical clothing. All of this was very suspicious, but he had an excuse for everything, and it didn't prove he was the one who killed Heather Barnett. They decided to focus on the big mystery in this case, whose lock of hair was found in Heather's right hand. Investigators posted to media outlets in England as well as Italy about the hair. Calls started coming in from women back in Potenza who had a chunk of their hair cut. It typically happened while sitting at a movie theater or on a bus. He would take a sample of whoever was sitting in front of him. Most of these women were able to identify Danilo Restivo as the man responsible. Still, even with this information, it did not provide physical evidence that put him at the crime scene. It's obvious he's their man. Now they just have to prove it. It wasn't until 2008, 6 years after the murder, that forensic science advanced enough to pull DNA from the green towel left in Heather's home. Boom. It was a match for Danilo Restivo. But Danilo, being the supposed genius that he is, had an excuse for it. He had left the towel there on his first visit to Heather's home. Investigators knew the only way to nail him for Heather's murder was to prove he did the same thing to Elisa Claps. The problem with that is she's still a missing person. If she was murdered, her body was never found. So, 2 more years go by, and it makes me sick to think such a dangerous man was roaming free this whole time. March 17th, 2010, the body of Elisa Claps was finally discovered. And guess where she was? The loft of the church where she met Danilo back in 1993. Meaning that for 17 years, people attended Mass with a corpse above their heads. That asshole priest could have helped save the life of Heather Barnett, which I don't even need to ask. I know that's what Jesus would do. Had no one entered the loft for 17 years? Even if the priest did deny access for the police to search, was he not curious? This seems so suspicious to me, like it's a cover-up or something, but it was never linked back to the priest. Maybe there is some rule about search warrants in churches, but I don't understand, 1, why the priest denied access to begin with, and 2, why the Italian police took no for an answer. Finally, British police had what they needed to charge Danilo Restivo with the murder of Heather Barnett. He went to trial in May 2011. The jury was unanimous in the guilty verdict. He was given a whole life order. In England, that's the equivalent to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to my pal Stuart Blues, host of British Murders, a whole life order is not very common. Danilo appealed. He said the prosecution team should not have been able to use Elisa Claps against him because he was not convicted of that crime. His sentence was reduced to a minimum of 40 years. The judge also added that it was, quote, highly improbable he would ever be released. There has been talk of him being extradited to Italy to stand trial for the murder of Elisa Claps, but for now, he remains incarcerated in England. And that is the story of Danilo Restivo, the hair fetish creepster / murderer. Jump on social media and tell me your thoughts about this case. You can find me on Twitter at KillerStoriesPC. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Killer Stories Podcast. You can email me, KillerStoriesPodcast@gmail.com, to send in a story suggestion, inquiries, to sponsor an episode, or just to say hi. In the show notes, you will find my link tree. From there, you can access the merch store and buy me a coffee if you would like to help support the show. As always, thanks so much for listening. Until next time, this has been a killer story.